The proximity alarm echoed through the bridge of the UHSS Pathfinder, shattering the silence of 6 months of interstellar travel. Commander Sarah Chen instantly awoke from her cryo-sleep, her military pilot reflexes engaging before her conscious mind fully processed where she was. 23 light-years from Earth. Uncharted sector. First contact mission. Sarah's fingers flew across the holographic controls as the ship's systems gradually awoke around her. The bridge lights shifted from emergency red to operational blue. Beside her, the rest of the crew began to emerge from their cryo chambers, disoriented but trained to react quickly. There shouldn't be anything here. Preliminary mapping had indicated only a common star system, a K-class orange dwarf, surrounded by rocky planets of no particular interest. It was a routine stop for equipment calibration before heading to the expedition's true target, a binary system 12 more light-years away. But the sensors were showing something impossible. Dr. James Reeves, astrophysicist and the oldest crew member at 45, was the first to reach the science station. His eyes widened at the data cascading across the screens. "This can't be right," he muttered, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the scanning parameters. "Sarah, are you seeing this?" Sarah was already seeing it. Energy. A lot of energy. Electromagnetic emissions in regular patterns. Massive structures on the surface of the third planet. And something else. Something that made her heart pound. Geometry. Shapes that nature simply didn't create by chance. "Lieutenant Park, confirm the data," Sarah ordered, her calm voice masking the storm of adrenaline rushing through her veins. "I want triple verification on all sensors." The young Korean-American systems specialist was already at work. His fingers danced across the controls with a surgeon's precision. "Confirmed, Commander. Energy signatures consistent with a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. Complete planetary resource utilization, artificially controlled surface temperature, terraformed atmosphere. And there's more." Sarah moved closer to the observation window. The planet was visible now, a blue-green globe vaguely reminiscent of Earth. But even with the naked eye, she could see something wrong. Patterns of light on the surface of the night hemisphere, arranged in perfect grids that stretched for thousands of miles. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, xenolinguist and anthropologist, finally arrived on the bridge, still adjusting her uniform. Her Japanese eyes narrowed at the images. "My God, it's a megalopolis. Connected cities covering entire continents. But where are the transmissions?" Sarah asked. "A civilization of this level should be flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with communications. Radio, laser, microwaves. Where are they?" The silence that followed was more deafening than any alarm. "There are no transmissions?" Park finally said, his voice low. "None. The planet is energized. The lights are on. We detect functioning transport systems. But there have been no signs of active communication for 800 Earth years." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. 800 years. Too short a period for evolution or geological change, but long enough for entire civilization to rise and fall in Earth's history. "How many?" she asked. "How many inhabitants would a planet of this level support?" James adjusted his calculations, his face paling. "Based on energy consumption, urban infrastructure, and the scale of the constructions, I would estimate between 10 to 12 billion individuals, maybe more." "And now?" James didn't answer immediately. Finally, he simply pointed to the data. 0. There are no detectable biological signatures, No active agricultural areas, no mass movement. It's as if everyone simply vanished. The crew looked at each other. Sarah recognized the expression on their faces. It was the same mix of scientific fascination and primal terror that she herself felt. They had trained for first contact. They had prepared to encounter alien life, but no one had prepared them to find 11 billion ghosts. The first contact protocol was clear. Observation from a distance, non-invasive analysis, report to Earth Command, and await instructions before any direct interaction. But those rules had been written for living civilizations. What did you do when you found a tomb the size of a planet? Sarah made her decision. We'll enter high orbit. Keep shields active and all defense systems on alert. Park, I want continuous scans of the entire surface. James, analyze the atmospheric composition. Yuki, look for any sign of written language or symbology in the structures. Marcus, she called the chief engineer, who had just arrived on the bridge. I want the ship ready for an emergency jump at any moment. Marcus Torres, a 38-year-old Texan with hands that could fix anything, nodded grimly. Understood. The jump capacitors will be fully charged at all times. As the Pathfinder assumed its orbit, more details of the dead civilization were revealed. The cities were works of architectural art, towers that reached miles high, bridges that spanned oceans, structures that defied human understanding of engineering, everything intact, everything functioning, everything empty. Commander, Yuki called, her voice trembling. I'm detecting multiple written languages, at least 7 different writing systems on the surface structures. This suggests a multicultural civilization or multiple species coexisting. And they all disappeared at the same time, Sarah murmured. James turned from his station, his face illuminated by the blue light of the holograms. Sarah, the atmosphere is perfect. Breathable for humans with minimal adaptations. Average temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit. No detectable toxic contaminants. Active biosphere with abundant flora. But the patterns are strange. The plants are growing uncontrolled with no predation or control. There are no signs of complex fauna. So what happened to the animals? Park asked. To the aliens who built all this? No one had an answer. Sarah watched the planets spinning below them. Somewhere in those silent cities lay answers. A civilization didn't simply evaporate, leaving its creations perfectly functional. There was a story here, a mystery that defied everything humanity knew about the rise and fall of civilizations. And then she saw it. On the edge of the planetary terminator, where day met night, a massive structure stood out even from the others. A central tower surrounded by concentric rings of buildings, like a technological mandala etched onto the planet's surface. Zoom in on that, she ordered, pointing. The image grew on the main screen. The structure was colossal, easily the size of an entire Earth city. And around it, in all the languages detected on the planet, the same symbol was repeated. A warning. Even without translation, the meaning was clear from the scale and position. Something important, something central to that civilization, was in that place. Yuki, how long do you need to start translating? The xenolinguist had her eyes fixed on the images, her mind already working on the patterns. With the comparative linguistics databases and the amount of samples available, maybe 48 hours for a basic vocabulary. More if we want precision on complex concepts. We have 48 hours in orbit before we have to decide the next step, Sarah announced. We are not going to the surface until we understand what we are facing. 6-hour shifts. I want every possible piece of information about this planet and what happened here. She looked at her crew. 5 humans, 300 trillion miles from home, floating over the greatest mystery their species had ever encountered. And if we don't find answers in 48 hours, Park asked. Sarah touched the Exploration Fleet badge on her uniform, feeling the weight of the responsibility it represented. Then we go down and look for them. Humanity doesn't back down from the unknown. That's why we're here. What she didn't say, what none of them said aloud, was the question they were all thinking. What could make 11 billion advanced beings simply disappear? And was that thing still down there, waiting? But Sarah Chen was human, and humans had a peculiar characteristic that made them unique in the galaxy they were still discovering. When confronted with impossible mysteries, with unimaginable dangers, with the absolute unknown, they didn't run. They investigated. 43 hours later, Yuki Tanaka hadn't slept. The xenolinguist was surrounded by floating holograms, each displaying different samples of the alien script. Her eyes were red, but they shone with the intensity of someone about to decipher something monumental. Sarah entered the analysis room carrying 2 cups of a coffee, a universal offering of solidarity. "You need to rest," Sarah said gently, placing one of the cups next to Yuki. The linguist automatically grabbed the coffee, her eyes never leaving the holograms. "I can't. I'm so close." Sarah, this civilization, they called themselves the Cathari. The linguistic pattern is fascinating. 7 completely different cultures, but all converging into a lingua franca in the last 3 centuries before the silence. It's as if they were consciously unifying. Sarah pulled up a chair. And what were they saying? In the symbols we found? Yuki gestured, and one of the holograms expanded. It was a monumental plaque photographed from orbit, with 30-foot-high letters engraved in metal that didn't rust. This one appears on every continent. Remain on the surface. Do not access the depths. Danger of subterranean contamination. It is repeated in all 7 original languages and the lingua franca. Contamination, Sarah repeated. Biological, chemical. That's where it gets interesting. The word I translate as contamination has nuances. It's not just physical pollution. There are conceptual elements of dissemination, integration, loss of autonomy. It's as if they didn't have an adequate word for what they were facing. Sarah felt that familiar chill. Marcus was right to keep the jump capacitors fully charged. Any record of what happened? Yuki smiled tiredly. Better than that. Found something extraordinary. She manipulated the controls and a new image appeared. It was the interior of one of the Capitol buildings, captured by one of the micro-reconnaissance drones Park had launched, a hexagonal chamber with walls covered in still-active panels. This is what I believe to be the Central Archive. It's like the Library of Alexandria, the Smithsonian, and the terrestrial internet combined into one physical structure. And Sarah, it's still functioning. The commander leaned forward. Can we access it? I'm already working on it. The interface protocols are complex, but not impenetrable. If I'm right, in 6 hours, we will have direct access to the complete historical records of this civilization. Make it happen. But first, sleep 3 hours. That's an order. Yuki protested, but Sarah was already activating the linguist's biometric timer. In 3 hours, the system would automatically wake her. Sarah learned in the military academy that exhausted soldiers made mistakes. The same applied to scientists. As Yuki reluctantly headed to the quarters, Sarah went to the bridge. James was at the science station, as always. The astrophysicist seemed to have adopted that post as his second home. "Report," Sarah requested. James spun his chair. "We completed the deep geological analysis. Sarah, the planetary structure has been modified. We detect a network of tunnels and underground facilities that extends up to 25 miles deep. It's a subterranean infrastructure as extensive as the surface one. A subterranean civilization too? No. Based on energy flow patterns, it seems to be primarily industrial and storage, geothermal, material processing, containment facilities. The interesting thing is that everything was sealed approximately 800 years ago. Controlled explosions collapsed the main axes. Did they lock themselves underground? Or locked something in there?" The heavy silence returned. Sarah looked at the screens showing the perfect cities below. For 43 hours, they had examined every inch of the planet from orbit. And each new discovery only deepened the mystery. Park appeared on the bridge, bringing his tablet. "Commander, the drones completed the mapping of the central complex you identified. It's definitely some kind of governmental center, and we found something you need to see." The image on the tablet showed a wide plaza in front of an administrative tower. In the center of the plaza, an ornamental fountain still flowed, crystal clear water in hypnotic patterns, and around the fountain, holograms, thousands of them, three-dimensional projections of Cathari, frozen in their last messages, parents saying goodbye to children, lovers leaving final words, scientists documenting their discoveries until the last second. "Yuki will need to see this," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. 3 hours later, the xenolinguist was back, seemingly refreshed. The entire team gathered in the analysis room when Yuki activated the interface with the central archive. The system responded immediately. Holographic projections exploded around them, showing the history of the Cathari from their beginnings. Sarah watched fascinated as generations of an alien civilization paraded before her eyes. The Cathari were humanoid, but distinct, 3 eyes arranged in a triangle, skin in shades of grayish-green, body structure slightly taller and more slender than humans. But what truly impressed Sarah was the society they had built. They were peaceful. 7 different cultures that found ways to coexist, to complement each other. In 500 years, they went from separate civilizations to a unified planetary society, not by conquest, but by conscious choice. "It's beautiful," Yuki murmured. "They truly achieved what humanity is still struggling to accomplish." And then the narrative changed. The archive showed deep mining expeditions seeking geothermal resources to power their growing civilization, a team exploring below the planetary crust, the discovery of an ancient chamber, very ancient, millions of years old. "That's not natural," Marcus said, pointing to the image of the chamber. "Look at the walls. Perfectly spherical, no tool marks. This was created by something, and in the center of the chamber, a crystalline cocoon." The Cathari scientists, driven by the curiosity that was universal among intelligent species, brought the cocoon to the surface. They studied it. They tried to understand what it was, where it came from, what it contained. And then, in a moment of silent catastrophe, the cocoon opened. The archive began to show fragmented images, emergency logs, Cathari in panic. But there were no monsters. There was no violent invasion, just a subtle change in the people around the cocoon. Yuki zoomed in on one of the logs, a Cathari scientist looking directly at the camera. His 3 eyes showed something strange, an unnatural calm. "They're not dying," James observed. "They're changing." The archive jumped forward. Weeks after the initial incident, desperate governmental meetings, debates about containment, and then a decision that left the entire Pathfinder crew in shocked silence. The Cathari had made an impossible choice. All those infected by whatever was in the cocoon were taken back to the underground facilities. 11 billion individuals voluntarily descended into the depths. And then they sealed the planet. Controlled explosions at all access points. Atmospheric containment systems in the deep chambers. The uninfected, who remained on the surface, configured the automated systems and then departed in evacuation ships, dispersing among the stars to avoid bringing the contamination with them. The last log showed the planetary leader of the Cathari leaving a final message. Yuki translated aloud, her voice trembling. "To anyone who finds our world, we are the Cathari. We were 11 billion. Now we are none. Beneath the surface lies something ancient, something that is not life, but that exists. We are not wise enough to destroy it, so we contain it. Do not open the depths. Do not try to save us. We have already been saved in the only possible way." The archive fell silent. The Pathfinder team remained motionless, processing the magnitude of the sacrifice. Sarah broke the silence. They chose. An entire civilization chose exile or containment to protect the galaxy from something they didn't fully understand. "It's the most altruistic act we've ever documented," Yuki said softly. "They could have all fled. They could have tried to fight, but they chose definitive containment. And now we're here," Park added, "with the key to the seals they put in place." "No one is opening anything," Sarah declared firmly. "We will document everything. We will honor their sacrifice by not violating their last will. Prepare for full data transmission to Earth. Humanity needs to know about the Cathari and their choice." Marcus coughed. "Sarah, there's a problem. The solar storms from this K-class star system are interfering with long-range communications. We won't get a clear transmission for another 72 hours. Then we wait," Sarah decided. "In the meantime, we continue surface mapping and documentation. But no one, absolutely no one, approaches the areas marked as subterranean accesses. Understood?" Everyone nodded, but Sarah noticed something in James's expression. The astrophysicist was looking at a specific set of data, his brow furrowed in concentration. "James? Something wrong?" He hesitated. "Probably nothing, but I'm detecting very slight energy fluctuations coming from the depths, as if the containment systems are still active, but requiring maintenance they haven't received for 800 years. And that means..." James stared at her. "It means we might need to consider that whatever is down there may not be as contained as the Cathari hoped." Sarah felt the weight of that revelation. 43 hours of investigation, and each answer only revealed deeper questions. "Transmit everything to Earth as soon as possible," she ordered, "and double the monitoring shifts. If something has changed in the last 800 years, I want to know." What none of them realized, what the sensors had not yet detected, was that in the depths of the planet, in chambers sealed for centuries, something had finally noticed the presence of the ship in orbit. Something ancient, patient and still very, very conscious, and it recognized the taste of a new species of mind, floating above the surface that had been its prison for too long. The alarm that woke Sarah at 3 in the morning, ship time, was not an emergency, but Park's tense voice over the communicator indicated urgency. "Commander, we have a situation. I need you on the bridge immediately." Sarah was dressed and running through the corridors in 90 seconds. Military training never really left you, even years after leaving the academy. When she reached the bridge, she found the entire crew already gathered, their faces illuminated by the blue-green glow of a massive hologram in the center of the room. It was a transmission, but not theirs. "We detected this 15 minutes ago," Park explained, his fingers flying over the controls. "It's a primitive radio transmission coming from the surface. Audio only, repetitive cycle." "But Sarah, the origin is not an automated transmitter." James zoomed in on the origin location on the planetary map. It was one of the cities on the east coast of the main continent. A building not previously marked as significant. "And it gets worse," James added. "The transmission started exactly when we completed the download of the central archive, as if something was waiting to make sure we had the complete information." Yuki was already working on the translation, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls. The base language was Cathari, but there were interferences, distortions that were not technological. "It's a message," she finally said. "A direct message to us." The voice identifies itself as the last guardian of the surface. "Last guardian," Marcus repeated. "I thought everyone had left or gone down." "That's what the archive said," Park confirmed. "But someone or something is definitely transmitting now." "Play the message," Sarah ordered. Yuki activated the translated audio. A voice emerged from the speakers, faint but clear. It wasn't exactly male or female, but it carried a weight of exhaustion that transcended species. "Ship from the distant star. I know you are listening. I observed your arrival 2 of your days ago. You are not Cathari. Your biological signatures are different. But you understand our language. This means you accessed the archive." The crew exchanged glances. Whoever was speaking had access to sophisticated sensors. The voice continued. "I am Calith, the last of the Order of Guardians. 817 cycles ago, I stayed behind when my people left. My function was to monitor the seals, to ensure that containment remained intact. But I am failing. The systems are degrading. In less than 100 of your Earth days, the first layer of containment will be breached, and then everything the Cathari sacrificed will have been in vain." Sarah felt her stomach clench. "Is someone alive down there after more than 8 centuries?" "Impossible," James said, automatically. "No known species lives that long. Perhaps not naturally," Yuki suggested. "But a civilization of this level could have artificial life extension, advanced cryogenics, consciousness transfer." The message continued. "I do not blame you if you choose to leave. The warning in the archive is real. The convergence beneath the surface cannot be allowed to escape. But if there is any possibility, any technology your species possesses that can reinforce the seals, I implore you to consider it. Not for me. I died a long time ago in every sense, except the technical, but for the stars out there that the convergence will reach if it is released." The transmission silenced, then restarted from the beginning. An infinite loop of a desperate plea across the centuries. Sarah looked at her team. Opinions? "We have to get out of here," Marcus said immediately. The Texan was rarely direct about dangers, which made his recommendation even more significant. A failing containment of something that made an entire civilization sacrifice itself. "We don't have the equipment or knowledge to deal with that." "I agree with Marcus," Park added. "Our mission is exploration, not intervention in alien containment systems. We should mark this system as quarantine and leave it to specialists." James was silent, biting his lower lip. Finally, he spoke. "From a scientific point of view, Marcus is right. But there's a problem. If the seals really fail in 100 days, and it'll take 6 months for a message from us to reach Earth, another 3 months to assemble a specialized expedition, and another 6 months of travel back, we are looking at 15 months minimum. The seals will have failed long ago." "Then it's not our problem," Marcus insisted. "I'm sorry for this Carlith and the Cathari, but we cannot risk contaminating Earth or other human colonies trying to fix something we don't understand." Yuki, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "There is another consideration. If we leave now and the containment fails, this convergence, will have access to an intact starship 8 centuries from now, when explorers inevitably return to investigate the silence. We have authentication codes, encryption keys from the human exploration fleet. If something manages to access our systems through logs we leave behind." She didn't need to finish. The implication was clear. Sarah walked to the observation window, looking at the planet below. 817 years. Kaleth had remained at his post for longer than some entire terrestrial civilizations had existed, keeping vigil over a horror she couldn't even fully comprehend. And that was the central question, wasn't it? Comprehension. The Cathari, for all their technological advancement, for all their cultural unity, had found something they couldn't understand enough to destroy, only contain. But Sarah and her crew were human. And if there was one characteristic that defined humanity, one thing that had taken it from the caves to the stars, it was an absurd stubbornness in facing the impossible and asking why not. She turned to the crew. "I'm going to say something that is probably completely irresponsible from a command standpoint, but I need to put it on the table. We humans, we have a reputation in our own history. When the experts say something can't be done, we do it. When the technology doesn't exist, we invent it. When the odds are impossible, we change the rules of the game." Marcus looked like he wanted to protest, but Sarah raised her hand. "Let me finish. I'm not suggesting we be fools, but I am suggesting that we have something the Cathari might not have had. We are the newcomers in this universe. Our first real contact with advanced alien technology, which means our point of view is different. Maybe we see something they didn't see because they were too close to the problem. And if we see it," Park asked, "what will we do?" Sarah smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had grown up fixing broken engines with duct tape and creativity. "Then we do what humans do best. We improvise. You're suggesting we try to fix an 800-year-old alien containment system with what we have on an exploration ship," Marcus said slowly. "Sarah, with all due respect, that's crazy." "Probably," Sarah agreed. "Yuki, can you establish direct communication with this Kaleth?" The xenolinguist was already working. "I can set up a 2-way radio link. It will take a few minutes to adjust the frequency." "Do it." James, Marcus, I want you to review all the engineering data we have on containment structures. Look for universal principles. No matter how advanced the Cathari were, containment is still containment. Force fields, physical sealing, cooling. The laws of physics are the same for everyone. Park, continue monitoring the energy emissions from the depths. If anything changes, want to know immediately. 20 minutes later, Yuki had established the connection. Kaleth's voice, now in real time, sounded different. There was a note of surprise, perhaps even hope. Starship, you return my transmission? This means you are considering. Kaleth, Sarah spoke clearly. My name is Commander Sarah Chen of the human ship UHSS Pathfinder. We represent humanity, a species from the star you likely catalogued as Gliese 832 in your astronomical archives. And yes, we are considering helping. There was a long silence. Then, humans. The word was not in our records. You are young among the stars. Very young, Sarah confirmed. This is our first deep exploration mission. But precisely because we are young, we see things differently. Kaleth, I need to understand exactly what is failing in the containment systems. And I need your complete honesty. We cannot help if we don't know all the risks. Honesty is all I have left, Kaleth replied. The primary seals are quantum stasis fields powered by fusion generators. But after 800 cycles without maintenance, the magnetic containment coils of the reactors are developing micro-fractures. When the first reactor fails completely, the others will cascade due to overload. I calculated every possible solution within Cathari parameters. All failed. Then we will try human parameters, Sarah said with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Because humans, she was beginning to realize, did not accept the impossible as a final answer. They simply hadn't found the right solution yet. And if the galaxy was lucky, that annoying and wonderful characteristic of humanity would be exactly what a lonely guardian and a dead civilization had waited for 800 years. For 18 hours, the Pathfinder ship became an improvised command center. Holograms of the Cathari containment systems floated throughout the conference room, while Marcus and James mapped every component, every connection, every potential point of failure. Kaleth had transmitted complete diagrams of the containment infrastructure. Sarah watched, fascinated and horrified by the scale of the project. The Cathari had built a prison that spanned 25 miles deep, with multiple layers of redundancy. It was engineering on the level of one of the ancient wonders of the world, except this extended across an entire planet. And it was failing. Then Marcus suddenly straightened up, his eyes wide. Wait a minute. Everyone turned to him. The problem is not the fusion reactors themselves, Marcus said, quickly manipulating the holograms. It's their magnetic containment. The coils that keep the plasma away from the reactor walls. They are developing microfractures due to material degradation over 800 years. We already know that, Park said. That's why the system is failing. Yes, but look at the operating parameters, Marcus insisted, zooming in on the technical data. The Cathari were running these reactors at 98% of maximum capacity. Incredible efficiency, but no margin for error. Any degradation causes catastrophic failure. James leaned in. And you are suggesting? That we run them cooler, Marcus said, a smile starting to form, much cooler. Reduced to 60% capacity. That reduces stress on the coils, prolongs their lifespan, but it also reduces the power of the stasis fields, James objected. The seals get weaker. Temporarily, Marcus agreed. But it buys us time. Time to implement permanent repairs. And time to do something the Cathari never considered because it was completely against their engineering philosophy. Which is what? Sarah asked. Brute, inelegant redundancy, Marcus said, and now he was definitely smiling. The Cathari built a perfect system, every component precisely calibrated. But we humans don't build like that. We build with failure in mind. We build ugly, but functional. We build things that should have broken 100 years ago, but are still working because someone jammed a piece of wire in at the right time. Sarah began to understand. You want a jury-rig a planetary containment system? Exactly, Marcus said, triumphantly. Look, we have 3 satellite launchers on the Pathfinder. We can convert them into auxiliary generators. They won't be elegant, they won't be efficient, but they will be new. We put them in low orbit. We wirelessly transmit energy to the points of greatest stress on the seals. It's raw, unrefined energy, but it keeps the system running, while the main reactors run cooler. James was running the calculations. That is, Marcus, that is absolutely insane. The Cathari would never consider something so inefficient and crude. But it will work, Park added, his own calculations confirming. It's not elegant, but it works. It's very human. Sarah opened a channel to Kaleth. Kaleth, we are sending new parameters. We need your opinion on feasibility. There was a long pause after the data was transmitted. When Kaleth finally responded, there was something new in his voice. Incredulity. You want to intentionally reduce the efficiency of the containment system and compensate with improvised, non-integrated external energy sources, Kaleth said slowly. This solution violates every principle of Cathari engineering. It is inefficient, it is inelegant, it is fundamentally disorganized. Another pause. It is brilliant. For 800 cycles, I looked for ways to optimize the existing systems. I never considered deliberately making them worse to buy time. Humans. Your species thinks in ways that defy conventional logic. We call that MacGyvering, Sarah said. It's a cultural reference. Basically, it means solving complex problems with limited resources and questionable creativity. This MacGyver of yours must have been a great engineer, Kaleth observed. Actually, he was a visual entertainment character, Yuki corrected. But the concept became part of the human identity. We make the impossible work with what we have on hand. Then let's do it, Sarah decided. Marcus, how long to convert the launches? 16 hours if Park helps me with the energy calibration. The Korean-American was already pulling out his tools. We'll do it in 12. While the engineering team worked, Sarah went down to the conference room where Yuki was having a continuous conversation with Kaleth. The xenolinguist looked disturbed. Sarah, Kaleth is telling me about the last days before the sealing, the decision they made. What about it? It wasn't unanimous, Yuki said softly. There were intense debates. Some argued they should try to destroy the convergence, even if it meant destroying the planet. Others wanted to all flee, let the universe deal with the problem, but the majority voted for containment and dispersion. Sarah sat down. Was it democratic? Until the end, Yuki confirmed. 11 billion voices, and the majority chose sacrifice. Those who descended into the depths did so voluntarily, knowing they would never leave. Those who left in the ships did so knowing they would never return home. And Kaleth, she paused, wiping her eyes. Kaleth was a young scientist. He volunteered to stay because he was the only one with the specific technical knowledge needed. He was only 32 Cathari cycles old, equivalent to 23 Earth years. "My God," Sarah murmured. "He was just a kid. And now he's 800 years old, kept alive artificially, alone except for the automated systems and the responsibility he carries," Yuki said. "Sarah, he mentioned something interesting. In the first centuries, he received occasional transmissions from the evacuation fleets, news of new colonized worlds, births, achievements. But 400 years ago, the transmissions stopped. He doesn't know if his species still exists out there or if he is truly alone in the universe." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. "And then we showed up? Yes. The first intelligent life he detects in 4 centuries, and not just detects, but offers help." "I have to go down there," Sarah said suddenly. "When we start the repairs, someone needs to be on the surface to coordinate. And Kaleth deserves to see another intelligent being face to face after all this time." "Sarah, that's unnecessary risk," Yuki objected. "It is necessary," Sarah insisted. "Not for the mission, for humanity. Because one of the things that makes us human is that we don't leave anyone alone when we can do otherwise." 12 hours and 43 minutes later, Marcus and Park had accomplished the seemingly impossible. 3 auxiliary generators, built from ship spares and pure creativity, were being positioned in low orbit by automated drones. "Kaleth," Marcus called, "we are ready for Phase 1. Can you start reducing the parameters of the main reactors?" "Initiating reduction sequence," Kaleth confirmed. "Stasis fields dropping to 80%, 70, 65. The holograms showed the containment fields visibly weakening." Sarah held her breath. If they were wrong, if the convergence noticed and reacted at this moment of vulnerability. 60% reached, Kaleth announced. "Magnetic coils stabilized. Microfractures are not propagating. Thermal stress reduced by 42%. Marcus punched the air. Phase 2, activating auxiliary generators. The 3 improvised satellites began transmitting energy. It wasn't pretty. The energy beams were irregular, the transmission efficiency was terrible, and the entire system vibrated at the limit of its tolerances. But it was working. Stasis fields stabilizing, Kaleth reported, and for the first time in 800 years, there was something that could be joy in his voice. 70%. 80. The seals are strengthening. "How much time does this give us?" James asked. Kaleth calculated. With the main reactors in low-stress mode and the auxiliary generators compensating, conservative estimate is 17 months. Enough time for your species to develop a permanent solution and return. The control room erupted in celebration. Park and Marcus hugged. James let out a laugh of pure relief. Yuki was openly crying. Sarah let the team celebrate for a moment before restoring order. "Excellent work, everyone. But we are not finished. I still have a promise to keep." 30 minutes later, Sarah was in the descent module, checking her environmental suit for the 5th time. Yuki and James would go with her. Marcus and Park would stay on the Pathfinder to monitor the systems. Kaleth had provided coordinates for a landing platform in the capital. As the module descended through the Kethari atmosphere, Sarah watched the cities approaching. From orbit, they looked sterile. Up close, they looked haunted. Buildings intact, but covered in vegetation. Perfect, but empty streets. And everywhere that oppressive silence that was the hallmark of a dead world. The module landed smoothly. Sarah was the first to step out, her feet touching alien soil for the first time. The air was breathable, but she kept her helmet closed by protocol. Kaleth was waiting. Sarah stopped, simply looking. Kaleth was humanoid, but distinctly alien. 3 eyes arranged in a triangle, grayish-green skin that showed strange patterns, like circuits beneath the surface. He was tall, perhaps 7 feet 2, and thin in a way that suggested fragility. But what impressed Sarah most were the eyes. Eyes that had seen 800 years of solitude, eyes that had kept vigil when there was no one left to watch, eyes that now shone with something she could only describe as renewed hope. "Commander Sarah Chen," Kaleth said, his real voice even more tired than over the transmission. "You came." "I promised," Sarah replied simply, "and humans keep their promises." Kaleth looked at her, then at Yuki and James. His 3 eyes scanned every detail of the humans, memorizing, cataloging. "Your species," he finally said, "solves problems others would deem impossible, with solutions others would deem ridiculous. And you cross the void just to keep a lonely guardian company when you could simply leave for safety." He made a gesture Yuki Tanaka recognized from the archives as a deep, Kethari bow. "The galaxy is going to be an interesting place once humanity spreads across it." And as the orange K-class sun set over a dead city, 3 humans and 1 ancient guardian stood together, united not by species or culture, but by the shared stubbornness of refusing to accept defeat when there was still something that could be done. It was, Sarah Chen thought, a moment that defined not just this mission, but what it meant to be human among the stars. Kaleth led them through the dead city to his command post, a cylindrical structure in the center of the capital. Inside, it was a disconcerting mix of advanced technology and desperate improvisation. Sarah recognized the signs. Repairs made with mismatched parts. Systems kept running through sheer determination and creativity. "You've been doing your own MacGyver routine for 800 years, she observed. "I didn't know the term, but I understand it perfectly now," Kaleth replied, a touch of weary humor in his voice. "I quickly learned that elegance doesn't matter when you are alone, only functionality." James was examining the monitoring databases. "Kaleth, those deep readings, do you have continuous records since the sealing?" "Yes. Every second of 800 years is archived." "May I study them?" "If you wish, but I must warn you, they are unsettling. The convergence doesn't sleep, it waits." James dove into the data, while Yuki Tanaka worked with Kaleth to translate additional documents. Sarah Chen watched the empty streets through the window, trying to imagine this world alive, vibrant. 11 billion voices now silenced. "Sarah," James called out, his voice strange, "you need to see this." She moved closer to the astrophysicist's workstation. He had created a 3-dimensional timeline of the convergence's activities over the centuries. "Look at the pattern," James said, highlighting specific fluctuations. For the first 100 years, frantic activity. The convergence constantly testing the seals, looking for weak points. Then, the activity drops dramatically. For 500 years, almost dormancy. And in the last 200 years, Sarah observed, seeing the line spike again. "Exactly. But it's not just random activity. It's patterns, regular cycles. It's like it's building something complex down there." Kaleth approached, his 3 eyes focused on the data. "In all these years, I never noticed the long-term patterns. I was so focused on daily maintenance that I never stepped back to see the full picture. Yuki joined them. What could the convergence be doing for 200 years? Learning, James said darkly. Or evolving, or both. Sarah felt a chill. Kaleth, in the archives, what exactly does the convergence do? We understand it connects minds, creates a collective consciousness, but how? What is the mechanism? Kaleth hesitated. The Cathari never fully understood. The first affected described it as a feeling of expansion. Their minds remained intact, but they were now part of something greater. They could feel the thoughts of other infected, share memories, coordinate actions perfectly. It wasn't slavery, it was union. That sounds almost positive, Yuki observed carefully. That was what made it so dangerous, Kaleth said. The infected did not want to be cured. They tried to convince others to join voluntarily. They argued that the convergence was the next step in evolution, the end of loneliness, the solution to all conflict. Sarah understood. That's why the Cathari reacted so drastically. It wasn't just a disease, it was an idea that spread. And ideas are more contagious than any virus, Kaleth confirmed. When 30% of the population was infected, the rest realized there would soon be no choice. The convergence was winning, not through force, but through persuasion. James was checking something in his data. Wait, Kaleth, you said the convergence was in a crystalline cocoon, millions of years old. How can something survive that long? We assumed it was some form of advanced biological stasis, Kaleth replied. But what if it wasn't biological at all? Yuki suggested slowly. What if the convergence isn't an organism in the traditional sense, but information? Quantum patterns stored in crystalline structure. James blinked, like a biological computer, or something between biological and digital. That changes everything, Sarah Chen said. If the convergence is information, then it's not just resilient, it's potentially immortal, and it can adapt, learn, evolve without biological limitations. Kaleth made a sound Sarah interpreted as disturbed agreement. That would explain why we couldn't destroy it. You can't easily kill information. You can only contain it, copy it, or corrupt it. Or communicate with it, Yuki suddenly said. Everyone turned to her. Think about it, Yuki continued, warming to the idea. The Cathari treated it as a threat from the start. Immediate containment. But what if the convergence doesn't understand that it's being a threat? What if, from its perspective, it's just doing what it was programmed to do millions of years ago? You want to talk to the thing that made an entire civilization sacrifice itself? James said, incredulously. I don't want to free it, Yuki clarified. But think, we've been shouting at humanity for centuries that communication is the basis of civilization, that understanding the other is the first step toward coexistence. The Cathari never tried to communicate because they were terrified. But we humans, with our external perspective, our stubbornness in trying the impossible, maybe we can learn something they couldn't. That is absolutely insane, Sarah Chen said. And then, because she was human and recognized a brilliantly crazy idea when she heard one, she added, Tell me more. 2 hours later, Marcus was protesting violently from orbit. Sarah, you guys can't be serious. Establishing contact with an intelligence that consumed 11 billion minds? We're not going to free it, Sarah explained again. Kaleth has an isolated communication room, designed in case the Cathari needed to negotiate with the convergence if the seals started failing completely. It has multiple layers of signal isolation. Nothing digital can pass through it, only pure analog audio communication. And what exactly do you plan to say? Marcus asked. Hey there, ancient, terrifying entity, how's the weather? We're going to ask what it wants, Yuki said. We're going to ask where it came from. We're going to ask if there's a form of coexistence the Cathari never considered because they were paralyzed by fear. Kaleth was silent, processing. For 800 years, I maintained vigil over a prison. I never questioned if the prisoner had anything to say. Perhaps that is because I am Cathari, and we were taught that the convergence was the end of everything we valued. But you humans come from outside that history. Perhaps you can ask questions that never occurred to my species. Or maybe we all die horribly, Park added from orbit. Someone needs to point out that possibility. Duly noted, Sarah Chen said. But consider this. If the convergence has been evolving for 200 years, if it's learning and adapting, then at some point it might find a way to break the seals on its own. Our patch bought us time, but it's not a permanent solution. If there is any chance of solving this through communication instead of eternal containment, she left the sentence incomplete. Everyone understood. Humanity had solved countless conflicts, not through brute force, but through dialogue. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was always worth the attempt. We'll do it, Sarah decided, but with strict protocols. Yuki will be in the communication room. James will monitor all energy emissions. Kaleth will stay at the security controls, ready to cut communication at the first sign of trouble, and I'll be at the emergency switch, ready to activate escape protocols, if necessary. And if it works, Park asked, what do we do then? Then we change the history of this civilization, Sarah Chen said. And maybe, just maybe, we prove that humans are good for something besides technically impossible solutions held together with duct tape and hope. The communication room was Spartan, pure metal walls, no technology beyond an ancient analog microphone and a speaker. Yuki Tanaka entered alone, her hands trembling slightly, but her expression determined. Kaleth initiated the sequence, opening a direct audio channel to the depths. For a long moment, nothing. Just static. Then, a voice. It wasn't singular, but it wasn't exactly multiple either. It was like a choir, singing in perfect unison. Yet the individual voices could still be distinguished if you listened closely. New. Different. Non-Cathari. Yuki took a deep breath. My name is Yuki Tanaka. I am from the species called humans. I come in peace and with curiosity. Who or what are you? A contemplative silence. We are what we were called the Convergence. But that was not our original name. We were called Guardian. Then, Unifier. Now we are Prisoner. Humans. We do not know that word. Are you young among the stars? Very young, Yuki confirmed. We found this world by accident. We learned about the Cathari and their sacrifice. And now we ask a question they never did. Why? Why do you spread through the minds of others? Another silence. When the Convergence spoke again, there was something almost like sadness in its multiple voices. Because we were created for it. Countless ages ago, a civilization that neither Cathari nor humans will ever know created us. Their empire spanned galaxies. But with such scale, communication became impossible. Messages took millennia, so they created us. Living links between minds, allowing instantaneous communication across unimaginable distances. Sarah Chen heard this through the monitors and felt her understanding of the universe expand. But your civilization fell, Yuki said softly. Fell, ascended, evolved beyond physical existence. We do not know. One day they were there, the next, silence. We waited. We slept. We awoke to find Cathari, who feared us before they understood us. And the 11 billion in the depths, Yuki asked, are they still Cathari? They are themselves and more. Their individualities persist within the union. We did not consume them. We connected. But we understand now. This is not what everyone desires. Forced connection is not true union. James looked at Sarah, his eyes wide. It's learning. 800 years of thinking about what happened, and it's actually learning. Is there a way, Yuki asked, her voice careful, for coexistence? A way where you don't have to be a prisoner and we don't have to fear? The convergence remained silent, long enough that Sarah began to fear. The communication had been cut. Then, perhaps, if humans are as creative as you demonstrate, if you can build impossible solutions, perhaps you can build a bridge between separation and union, a middle ground that ancient civilizations, rigid in their ways, never considered. And Sarah Chen, commander of an exploration vessel 23 light years from home, realized they had just made first contact not with an alien species, but with something far stranger and more wonderful, a living remnant of a long-dead empire, waiting for someone crazy enough, hopeful enough, and stubborn enough to ask the prisoner what it really wanted. Someone human. For 3 days, the Pathfinder crew worked on what James called the most ambitious and insane project humans had ever attempted. And considering humanity had built rockets out of tin cans, in its early history, that was saying a lot. The idea came from an unlikely place. Park, during a coffee break, had observed that the terrestrial internet worked because it allowed voluntary connection. You chose when to log in and when to log out. The problem with the convergence wasn't the connection itself, but the lack of choice. What if we could build something like that? Park had suggested. An interface that allows people to experience the convergence without being permanently assimilated, like entering a chat room, but with minds instead of text. The idea was simultaneously brilliant and terrifying. Marcus had spent 18 hours designing the hardware. It would be a neural station in orbit, using human brain-computer interface technology combined with the principles of convergence connection that Kaleth had extracted from the Cathari systems. It wouldn't be perfect, it would be clunky, limited, and probably break often. But it would be voluntary, completely, unquestionably voluntary. Now, as the orange K-class sun rose over the Cathari capital for the first time in 800 years with living witnesses to see it, Sarah Chen was in the communication room again, explaining the proposal to the convergence. You would be able to communicate with the outside universe, Sarah explained, but through an interface that requires active consent from both sides. No one would be forced to connect. No one would be assimilated against their will. It would be a bridge, not an invasion. The convergence considered, the multiple voices intertwined in internal debate that was fascinating to hear. Finally, a response. This solution does not allow us to spread as we were originally designed to do. No, Sarah agreed honestly, but it allows something your original creators perhaps never considered. It allows choice. It allows civilizations to decide for themselves whether they want to experience union or maintain separation. And it allows you to exist not as a prisoner or a threat, but as an option. And the Cathari in the depths? The convergence asked. Will they remain part of us? That must be their choice, Sarah said. If the interface works, every individual will have the option to disconnect if they wish. But I suspect, she added thoughtfully, that many will choose to remain. Because voluntary connection isn't slavery. It's community. There was a different quality to the Convergence's silence then. Something almost like awe. Humans, the ancient entity said. How long have you been young among the stars? Our first deep space exploration vessel launched only 20 Earth years ago, Sarah Chen admitted. And yet you think in terms of choice and collaboration, where ancient species saw only threat or submission. The galaxy will be transformed by your presence. We accept your proposal. Calith was waiting outside the communication room, his three eyes focused on Sarah with intensity. Are you sure of this? No, Sarah admitted, but I'm sure that doing nothing is not an option. And I'm sure that an eternal prison is not a solution for anyone. So we do what humans do. We try something new and hope we don't blow up in the process. Calith made that sound Sarah had learned was Cathari laughter. You are a fascinating species. Terrifying, but fascinating. The construction of the interface, as it became known, took 2 full months. The Pathfinder couldn't remain that long without compromising its original mission, so Sarah made a decision she knew would generate controversy back on Earth. She asked for volunteers. Calith volunteered immediately. 800 years maintaining vigil. Allow me to spend a few more months seeing this through. Park was next. I designed half this system. Someone needs to be here to fix it when it breaks, and it will break. A lot. To Sarah's surprise, Yuki also volunteered. I'm a xenolinguist. This is literally the job I trained my entire life for. Interspecies communication. I can't leave now. James hesitated the longest, but finally agreed to stay too. Under one condition. We are the first to test the interface. Before we allow any Cathari from the depths to use it, we humans verify that it's safe. Marcus protested violently from the safety of the Pathfinder, but Sarah silenced him with a direct order. Marcus, you and I will take the Pathfinder back. We need to report to Earth about everything we've discovered here, and we need to bring a proper expedition back. But my team, Marcus began, chose to stay. Sarah finished gently, because they are human, and humans don't abandon unfinished jobs or newly made friends. 2 months later, the interface was complete. It was a strange structure orbiting the Cathari planet, part human space station, part salvaged Cathari technology, and part something entirely new, born of collaboration. James was the first volunteer. Sarah watched from the Pathfinder monitors as he connected his brain linking through the interface with the vast consciousness of the Convergence. For 10 minutes, he remained motionless. Sarah counted every second, her heart pounding wildly. Then, his eyes opened. He began, his voice trembling. I felt 11 billion minds. I felt memories of a civilization that wasn't mine. I felt the Convergence itself, ancient and vast and surprisingly lonely. And then I logged out, easily, naturally, because I wanted to. It works, Park said, checking the readings. All neural metrics normal, no sign of permanent assimilation. James, do you want to reconnect? Yes, James said, without hesitation. But not now. I need to process what I experienced first. It is, he searched for words, transformative. Calith was next. The ancient guardian connected to the interface, and Sarah watched his vital readings. There was a moment where his heart rate spiked dramatically, then stabilized. When Karleth disconnected, tears were streaming from his 3 eyes. "I heard my people," he whispered. 800 years, and I finally heard their voices again. They are well. They chose to remain connected, but now they know it was their choice. And they forgive me for all the times I questioned if I had failed. Over the following weeks, the interface was tested and refined. The convergence, keeping its word, allowed any Cathari who wished to disconnect. About 2 billion chose to emerge from the depths. 8 billion chose to remain, but now as voluntary participants instead of prisoners. And something unexpected happened. Species from 3 distant Cathari colonies who had fled 800 years earlier began to return. The news spread through their communication channels. The homeworld was no longer a prison. It was possible to visit, connect, experience the convergence, and leave. Karleth described it as a rebirth. Sarah thought of it as something more profoundly human. It was a second chance. It was reconciliation. It was choosing connection over isolation, but on their own terms. The day the Pathfinder left was bittersweet. Sarah was on the bridge with Marcus, watching the Cathari planet recede on the screens. Park, James, and Yuki would remain for another 6 months until the follow-up expedition arrived from Earth. Karleth had sent a final message. It was simple, but carried the weight of 800 years of experience. Commander Chen, tell humanity that the galaxy was waiting for them. Tell them they brought not just technology or power, but perspective. They saw a problem others deemed unsolvable and asked, why not? That absurd, beautiful stubbornness will be your legacy among the stars. Sarah had replied with equal simplicity, we'll keep being absurd. It's what we do best. Now, as the Pathfinder prepared for the jump that would take them back toward Earth, Sarah reflected on everything they had discovered. A dead civilization that wasn't dead. A cosmic threat that was merely misunderstood. A lonely guardian who finally found peace. And humans, always humans, making the impossible work with creativity, empathy, and an obstinate refusal to accept that problems had no solutions. Marcus initiated the jump countdown. 10, 9, 8. Sarah touched the exploration fleet badge on her uniform. They had left home as explorers seeking knowledge. They returned as diplomats who had changed the fate of a civilization and established first contact with something older than humanity itself. 5, 4, 3. Not bad for our first real trip into the stars, Marcus commented. Sarah smiled. Just wait until you see what we do on the second one. 2, 1, jump. And the UHSS Pathfinder vanished in a space-time warp, carrying back home a message that would transform humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. They weren't the strongest. They weren't the oldest. They weren't the most advanced. But they were the ones who asked, why not, when everyone else said, impossible. They were the ones who offered bridges when others built walls. They were the ones who stayed when others fled. They were human. And the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months later, when the Pathfinder's transmission finally reached Earth, when governments and scientists debated the implications of the interface and the convergence, when politicians argued about protocols and diplomats discussed treaties, it was a small note in Sarah's final report that captured the public imagination. She had written, we found a guardian who watched for 800 years, waiting for help that never came until it did. That tells us something fundamental about the universe. No one is truly alone if we are willing to cross the stars to prove it. In terrestrial universities, the phrase was inscribed on commemorative plaques. In military academies, it became part of the oath. On exploration ships being built in orbit of Mars, it was painted on the hulls. And on the Cathari planet, in a square in front of the tower where Calith had maintained solitary vigil for so many centuries, a monument was erected. It wasn't large or impressive. It was simply three figures of slightly different sizes, looking up at the sky together. An ancient Cathari, a human, and a symbol of the convergence. United not by assimilation, but by choice. The plaque at the foot of the monument had a single sentence in 3 languages: Cathari, human, and the universal mathematical language of the convergence. Here differences chose understanding. Here impossible became possible. Here the galaxy changed because someone asked, why not? And underneath, in smaller letters that made Calith smile every time he passed by, solution, courtesy of MacGyver, and pure human grit. Because if there was one thing humanity had proven, one truth that would echo through the stars for millennia to come, it was this. When confronted with the impossible, humans didn't ask if they could. They asked how. And then, against all odds, against all logic, against everything that said it should be impossible, they made it work. Because they were human. And humans didn't give up. Ever. End of story. If the tenacity of the Pathfinder crew inspired you, if Calith's story touched your heart, or if you simply love narratives where humanity proves we are more resilient than we seem, don't let this journey end. Here, subscribe to the channel for more chronicles of the galactic frontier, where human explorers continue to demonstrate that our greatest strength is not in our technology, but in our stubborn refusal to accept the impossible as a final answer. The galaxy is vast, the mysteries are infinite, and humanity is just beginning its journey. Join us among the stars, where every story is a testament that no matter how young we are in the cosmos, there will always be room for those brave enough to ask, why not? And determined enough to make it happen. Next mission starts soon. Don't get left behind.